Hi everybody! So today we're going to be talking about section 3.5, which is about another technique we can use for graphing lines. So far we've already learned how to graph lines by making a table. We've learned how to graph lines using the intercepts. And now we're going to be practicing graphing lines using something called slope-intercept form. So the reason we talked a little bit about slope already in this chapter, I'm sorry, you couldn't see what I wrote there, just kidding. The reason we've already talked quite a bit about slope in this chapter is because we're now going to use slope to graph a line instead of looking at a line that's already been graphed and finding the slope. We're kind of going the other direction. So this equation right here, y equals mx plus b, is called slope-intercept form. And the reason we call it slope-intercept form is that in this equation, we can identify the slope and the y-intercept of the line from the equation itself. So looking at this equation, you'll notice that the y is by itself on the left-hand side of the equal sign. There's an m next to the x, and there's a b. The m is actually a number. So when you see one of these equations for real, when we're going to graph it, that's going to be a number. And this number is the slope of the line. The reason we use the letter m is because it tells us how to move between 2 points. So once we know how to start, we're going to be able to use this pattern to move to the next point. And the pattern is rise over run. Now the b, which is going to be a number with no variable, is going to be the y-intercept. What this is it tells us where to begin, which is why we call it b. And this is always going to be a point on the y-axis of the graph. So if we wanted to graph a line using those two pieces of information, let's go through the process. The first step is going to be to rearrange the equation into slope-intercept form, which means you're going to have to rearrange the equation until it looks like this, where the y is by itself. Now if we do that in this example, the original equation is 3x plus y equals 2. In order to get y by itself, we would subtract the 3x on both sides. So y would equal negative 3x plus 2. Now you'll notice I did not write 2 minus 3x because I want the term that has the x to be first, just like the term that has the x is first here. Based on this, I can see that my slope would be negative 3 and my y-intercept would be positive 2. Now my slope is how I move and my y-intercept tells me where to begin. So I'm going to start by graphing a point at the 2 on the y-axis. Remember, the y-axis goes up and down, so I'm going to start with a point on the 2. Now from there, I need to use rise over run to move. But if I look at this slope, it looks like just a number. It doesn't look like a fraction. So what you're usually going to want to do is write divided by 1 in order to turn this number into a fraction. That means that my rise would be negative 3. So I would go from this beginning point down 3 spaces, and then my run would be 1. So I would go right 1 space. Now I'm going to continue that pattern, down 3, right 1, until once I reach this point, I can no longer go down 3, right 1. There's not enough space. So instead what I can do is go back up to my starting point and reverse both directions. So instead of going down, I'm going to go up 3. Instead of going right, I'm going to go left. And when I run out of room that way, I can stop. From here, I'm just going to take a straight edge, like my ID, for example, and I'm going to draw a line through those points that goes beyond the edges of the graph and has arrows, and I'm done. Let's take a look at some equations. The first thing we're going to practice is just taking these equations and rearranging them if necessary so that we can identify the slope and the y-intercept. So if I look at problem number 1, I'm noticing that the y is already by itself equals 3x plus 4. So what I'm going to do is just use the numbers, because it's already arranged properly, and find the slope, which would be 3 over 1, because I want to make it look like a fraction, and the y-intercept, which would be 4, and just list those numbers. In problem number 2, I'm noticing I have a little extra work to do because this equation is not arranged properly. So 3x minus 3y equals 12 is my original equation. I'm now going to subtract the 3x on both sides. Remember, my goal is to get the y by itself. So I have negative 3y equals negative 3x plus 12. Now I'm going to divide everybody by negative 3. And when I do that, I get y equals, now 3 divided by 3, negative 3 divided by negative 3 makes a positive 1, x, and 12 divided by negative 3 makes negative 4. So based on my new rearranged equation, my slope would be 1 over 1, and my y-intercept would be negative 4. Let's try some problems where we have to make some graphs. So problem number 3 says, use this equation, find the slope and the y-intercept, and then make the graph. My first step is to make sure it's arranged properly. Now, based on this equation, I can see that the equation is arranged correctly. So the y is by itself equals the slope times x plus b. So the slope would be negative 1/4. And the y-intercept would be 2, positive 2. The y-intercept tells me where to begin. That's why we call it b. So the y-intercept says begin on the positive 2. The slope tells me how to move. So having negative 1 over 4 means go down 1, right 4, because it's rise over run. So from here, I'm going to go down 1, right 4 spaces, and put a new point there. Now, if I try to go down 1, right 4 spaces, again, I'm out of room. So instead, I'm going to go back to my original starting point and reverse both of these. And I'm going to go up 1, left 4. If I try to go up 1, left 4 again, I'm once again out of room. So I'm just going to stop. I'm going to draw a line through my points. And I'm going to make sure it goes beyond the edges of the graph and that it has arrows. Let's take a look at number 4. So the first step is to make sure my equation is arranged properly. Based on the original setup here, I can see I have a little extra work to do because I need to get the y by itself. So to do that, I would just subtract 2x on both sides, which means I would get y equals negative 2x plus 3. Now in this equation, the slope would be negative 2, which I'm going to write negative 2 over 1 because I need a rise and I need a run. And the y-intercept would be 3. The y-intercept tells me where to begin, so I'm going to begin on the positive 3 on the y-axis. From there, I'm going to go down to right 1, down to right 1, down to right 1, down to right 1. As soon as I run out of room, so I can't go down to right 1 anymore, I don't have enough spaces, I'm going to go back to where I started and go up to left 1. I'm going to draw a line through the points, make sure it goes beyond the edges of the graph and that it has arrows. Let's do another example. So problem number 5, I look at the equation and I go, okay, this is arranged properly. So my slope is going to be negative 2, and I like to write negative 2 over 1. My y-intercept is going to be 5, which means I'm going to begin on the positive 5. And from there, I'm going to go down to right 1, down to right 1, down to right 1, down to right 1, down to right 1. When I run out of room, I'll go back to the beginning, but on this graph, if I try to go up to left 1 to reverse it, there isn't enough room. So I'm just going to draw a line that goes through these points, that goes beyond the edges of the graph, and that has arrows, and I'm done. Let's try one more example. So this last example, I'm noticing the equation is not arranged properly. I need to get the y by itself. So I'm going to start by subtracting x on both sides, which means I get 3y equals negative x plus 9. Then I'm going to divide everything by 3. So I get y equals, now the invisible number here by the x is a 1. So I'm going to have negative 1/3 x plus 9 divided by 3 is 3. Now based on this equation, negative 1/3 would be my slope, and my y-intercept would be 3. That means I'm going to begin on the positive 3, and from there I'm going to go down 1, right 3, down 1, right 3. Once I run out of room, I'm going to go back to where I started and reverse both instructions. So go up 1, left 3, up 1, left 3. Finally, I'm going to use a straight edge to draw a line through those points. Make sure it goes beyond the edges of the graph and put arrows. All right, that is the end of learning how to graph with a slope and a y-intercept. We will practice this in class tomorrow. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.